Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is episode number 170. This is the internet's only comedy podcast defending the world from the robots. My name is Alexander Holland. I'm sat in Berlin, Germany, and sat across from me digitally as he is every single week. It's the number one tenured professor of podcasting. He's got to be the one called
John Maloney.
And John Maloney, for me, it's the morning, bright and early, 6:20 a.m. in Berlin. Because you're an international businessman, you're in Singapore again. Anybody who's looking at the YouTube channel will see that John's back to Changi Airport Terminal 7, the fantasy boys' bedroom that you can rent. That you can rent out. He's just anxiously glancing up at the departures board, waiting for that go to gate sign. And
I've got a couple of days, to be honest. I got to my hotel in Singapore and I was like, I miss that bedroom. So I went back to Changi Airport and I said, is there any reason I can't use this bespoke fantasy waiting lounge just as my hotel? And they said it's prohibitively expensive, and I said money is no object, please, anything. And now they've let me stay, and they've added some sounds of children playing in the next room just to add to the
so for everybody,
just to add to the immersive fantasy.
So are you allowed to say whose home you've been staying at and whose bedroom you are in? You can just say child A.
This is child A's bedroom. Sounds like we're running an experiment. This is the control child.
This is a control child.
He's just being given a placebo. But it's Jacinta's brother and sister-in-law's home, and they've got 3 children, and I'm in the eldest child's bedroom. He's 8, I think. So
cool.
It's your classic 8-year-old bedroom, and I'm loving it. I love sitting here doing work, feeling like if I can just glance up from the monitor, I can practice my times tables. Actually, probably from having them in my peripheral vision for a few days, I've become better at times tables than I've been in a while, I suspect. And it's great, although I did start my morning with a coffee, as I like to do, and it brought to mind something that I thought I'd mention on the podcast, which is that Jacinta's brother, who I don't think is a listener, and I'm sure if he is or happens to listen to this, he won't take it personally, but they've got a Nespresso machine.
Yeah.
And previous days I've been in Singapore, I've been going out for coffee, or sometimes we've had some proper coffee available. But this morning I used the Nespresso machine, and I thought it feels like we've reached the end of the era of Nespresso machines. I remember when they were all the rage, when offices were getting fitted out with them, when there was lots of ads. I think you had like George Clooney maybe acting as the spokesman for Nespresso. Yep. And then there was a bunch of kind of copycat coffee pod producers. And I went to use it this morning and I thought this suddenly feels like a very sort of 2000s or 2010s experience that I just don't really want to have anymore. And I put the coffee pot in and I put the little put the little handle down. Yeah. And then I pressed the large cup. And I've never really been sure that I'm using them correctly. I pressed the large cup as opposed to the small cup.
Yeah, I know the buttons.
And it went, and then it produced probably about half a centimetre of tepid coffee at the bottom of the cup. and then I thought, if that's long, I don't know what the little cup would have done. Just produced a vapor that smelled of coffee. But and then I thought, well, that's great, because now I just need to dispose of this pod, which will decompose over the next 20,000 years, and has served its purpose by it giving me a single-use coffee. And I thought, why was this ever a thing? I mean, this is so much less pleasurable to me than putting espresso beans into a grinder or putting ground beans into a, coffee plunger. Which maybe that's kind of a cultural thing that some places don't use plunger coffee as much. I know Americans like their drip coffee, but to me, it seemed suddenly like a strange and redundant piece of tech, and it seemed like we must be nearing the end of the pod coffee era.
Yeah,
we're going to look back on it as a weird flash in the pan.
So you like the theater of preparing coffee by grinding the beans, the ritual, the ceremony.
I do. Yeah, I usually put a little bit of Deep Forest. I'll put a Deep Forest CD on. And then I actually do have a little manual grinder, which I don't use every day because it's a bit of a pain in the ass, but it is nice kind of tactile sensation and you smell the beans as they're getting crushed. But I also just like buying ground coffee and putting it in the plunger and waiting a few minutes. Then you've got like a whole pot, not a little dribble from a pod that's then got to be disposed of.
Yeah. I think it's
I don't really get it.
I think because different countries have different coffee cultures and different expectations of coffee standards and quality. The first time I ever really saw those automated machines was in 2007 when I first visited Europe, and I was staying at a few people's homes who had those push button solution coffee machines, and it was the first time I'd been exposed to them because I also come like you, John, I was coming from Australia where everybody had plunger coffee or the mocha pot, which is my choice of coffee delivery system, which I just used before, the classic Italian stovetop pressurized little coffee pot, which is from the turn of the century, 100 years ago, the Bialetti, invented by Barry Bialetti, which is how I love to do it. But yeah, people love the convenience of the Nespresso. They love that you don't have to do anything. And also there's no cleanup. I think that's a big thing. The problem with it, the problem with a lot of other coffee, particularly if you've got a actual espresso type machine at home with the handle and you put the ground beans in the handle and stuff, at the end of it, you have this mess of ground coffee tends to, no matter how many times I tell myself that, I'm going to be so good and it's going to be so clean, I make one of them and there's just ground coffee, dry and wet ground coffee and brown water all over my kitchen bench. And I just think, but I spend so much time concentrating on doing this right, and there's just shit everywhere. I read also that Nespresso, I believe those machines existed for some years before because it's a Nestle product, isn't it? That's why it's called Nespresso.
I guess so. Yeah.
I think it's spoken about in marketing classes, Nespresso, because I think that the machine existed for years before anybody knew what it was, and nobody was buying them. And then the company, I think the machines looked a bit dusty and old, and then then Nestle approached a design company and said, "Can you make our dusty old machine look funky and cool?" And then this company specialized in that stuff, and they said, "Yeah, sure." So they took it. I think this is right because I was listening to a marketing expert talk about it, and I think they made it look a bit cooler, and then they got Clooney to come in and say, "Hey, you know what? Nespresso is not just for the office. It's because I think it was marketed at offices beforehand, and then Clooney came in and said, no, Hollywood elites who they use a crappy espresso machine, just like me, just like George Clooney from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?"
They introduced the sort of funky pastel colored pods, each color representing a different variety of coffee. And if you wanted if you wanted a strong Ethiopian blend, or if you wanted a Kenyan blend, you'd go for or a decaf. I mean, if you're drinking decaf pod coffee, I don't know what you're doing really. I mean, just have a cup of tea for Christ's sake. But yeah, but it's true. And then there was. I'm just looking at the. I mean, I've just kind of done this on the fly, but I'm looking at the Wikipedia article, which is massive and has all this stuff about litigation that they've gone through, including Australian company Kogan announcing the development of Easy Press, which was compatible with Nespresso pods.
Oh,
and
that's
then I
right.
think Nespresso was like, "Don't be doing that.
Yeah.
Don't put our. It's like repairing your Apple with an
Exactly.
unlicensed
Right to
repairer.
repair. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. My right to caffeinate was infringed.
Yeah, they wanted to control the supply of pods. They wanted to say, look, you can't put anything in here except a Nestle pod, so that they could collect all the no third party pods. And then
no black market pods.
No black market pods. And then lots of companies have been trying to solve the problem of waste with Nespresso, with pod-based espresso machines. People trying to come up with, and I think you can now get biodegradable or slightly more environmentally friendly espresso pods. I'll have to speak to my friend Wojtek Vasecki, who doesn't listen to the podcast, but he's one of the number one green voices on LinkedIn. Check him out, everybody. I'm the type of guy who only has LinkedIn friends that have over 100,000 connections, and that's Wojtek Vasecki and the circular economy, and he would be the guy to speak to. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that in the coming weeks. I'll say, Wojtek, what's the real 411 on espresso pods? Because he's going to know. He will have been in meetings and conferences with the leaders of the world and the leaders of pod-based coffee.
World leaders from the global south saying, look, we've got mountain ranges which are constituted of disused pods.
There's a town. There's a town which didn't exist 10 years ago, but it's actually sprung up because we started dumping so many used Nespresso pods that the community eventually started building with them and living amongst them. So there's now there's a dangerous health hazard little city that they've built of Nespresso pods, living in Nespresso pod houses.
One of the least earthquake resistant building materials available. Yeah, it says here it was founded in 1986. So there you go.
Wow,
right,
there you go. Yeah,
it didn't come into vogue until probably, I don't know, mid to late noughties.
86. That's crazy. It could have been in Back to the Future.
So thanks for so that's a little bit of ironically critical content about show sponsor Nespresso.
I was a bit concerned yesterday about being critical of people that I want to become a best friend with, because my friend, a dear friend, Samantha Cook, went and saw the Killers yesterday in London with her partner Carmen, and I was jealous as hell because I have never seen them live, and I've really fallen in love with them. I didn't get into the first album. It was just around, and I remember when that first album came out, a bunch of people that I thought were kind of dicks in my social circle or extended social circle got really into it, and I was like, oh, I don't want to like a band that these people like a bunch of really middle of the road people were really into.
I remember that too.
Oh, they were going, you know that song that goes, somebody told me that you had a girlfriend that looked like a boy. And I said, nah, that's not for me.
Not doing that.
Not doing it. And then I actually did love a few songs. I grew to love a few songs off that first album. And then I got really into the second album, which is called Sam's Town. And then I was just sitting at home one day going, oh my God, I could have never known that these Las Vegas boys, these headed by Brandon Flowers, a crazy Mormon.
Brandon Flowers, yeah.
By the way, if you haven't seen him recently, just Google 2024 Brandon Flowers, because he has
Okay.
done everything to his head to just look as perfect as it possibly can be. He's looking super smooth. He has the world's
he?
most incredible hairline and gorgeous hair.
Oh my
and just
God.
crazy veneers in the last couple of years, like massive,
Look at those.
beautiful white, pearly whites. And he gives a big.
You could play a sonata on those bad boys. I'm looking at them right now.
You get blinded when the lasers from the show hit a flower's veneer and reflects back into your eye. Ugh! You'll say
He's always
during
had
this
that sort of. He's always had that a kind of James Dean handsomeness to him.
Yeah.
like like a kind of like very handsome, but a little bit on the edge between clean cut and just a little bit ruffled, and he looks like he's aged well, and presumably so has his faith in Mormonism.
Yeah, it has. I mean, if anything, as we keep saying, Christianity, it's come back around. So people like him are uniquely positioned to say, I told you so, everyone. I told you.
Yeah.
You're all making fun of Russell Brand used to make fun of me, and now Russell Brand's knocking on my Las Vegas door, begging to hang out with me and the only other person that's ever come from Las Vegas, Andre Agassi, tennis champion, and maybe the corpse of Frank Sinatra. That's
Frank Sinatra. Don Rickles just going, just making fun of us all from the grave.
The corpse. It's just the Rat Pack corpses all decaying on a couch, and then it's just Andre. You look out the back. Andre Agassi's just. You look out the back of the tennis court and go, Brandon, is that Andre Agassi? He goes, yeah, he's always here. He never leaves. Is that the Rat Pack just decaying? Is that the original Rat Pack decaying on your sofa? He's like, yeah, everything from Las Vegas is here.
I pulled these veneers out of Frank's body and they're good as new.
But the reason that I was feeling a little bit anxious is because I love the Killers and I love Brandon Flowers. And then I realized, and look, our podcast is getting more popular. It's getting more professional looking. I started fantasizing about becoming a best friend with Brandon Flowers. But then if Brandon goes back and listens to the early episodes of the pod.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't go too hard. And I think in the episode where we talk about the Killers, I say how much I love them and him, and particularly his voice. But then I do refer to a famous YouTube clip that I think is from a Dutch television show, some European, maybe a Belgian television show, where they managed to invite. I don't know why. I think I said this at the time. I don't know why he agreed to it, but some television show said, Brandon, will you come and defend Christianity and in particular Mormonism against crotchety old atheist Richard Dawkins? And so it's this weird in front of a studio audience where they just back and forth, and it's just a bit uncomfortable because
what's Brandon going to say?
Yeah, what's Brandon going to say?
Do you believe Jesus came to America? Yeah, I do actually. And then Dawkins just goes, what do you think of that, everyone? Pretty nuts.
Dawkins turns to the audience and just points at him and just goes, look at this idiot. Yeah, he can make a great song, but this is crazy. And then of course Dawkins would say, well, based on what evidence? And then, Brandon would just say, oh, it's just faith. It's not about evidence. And so we went into that a little bit, and I think it had a slightly making fun of tone, as this bit that we're doing right now does.
We've fallen into the same trap. We'll have to call this nothing to do with the Killers, so he's thrown off the scent.
Exactly. So we won't. Episode 170 is just going to be called nothing to do with the Killers. But can you, John,
Brendan Weeds?
Can you give Brandon a message now so that he knows?
A more positive message.
Maybe just explain to him that I want to be a best friend with him because I love the Killers and I love him as a front man, and I want him to know that every time that he sings "When You Were Young," when we were young. When you were young. When you were young. Anytime he sings that and he gets to that kind of post-chorus bit that goes, and sometimes you close your eyes and see the place where you used to live. Every time he sings that live, I break down and cry a bunch of Las Vegas tears. Maybe you want to. I cry tears like I lost all my money on the blackjack table in Las Vegas. I lost every time I listen to album Sam's Town, I get so emotional. I cry like I lost my shit in Vegas.
Brandon Richard Flowers, we've had some fun this morning, but we love you very much. I'm surprised to learn you're 43 years old. You were born just a year and a half before I was, and you're looking great. I love your chiseled face. I love your dentures. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You've got dentures, and I love them. And and look, I don't need the LDS church because you're the only Latter-day Saint I need. And when I think about being jealous of Jacinta or other women that I've been with over the course of my life, I think about that song. Now she's taking off her pants or however it goes.
Mr. Brightside. He gets very specific. Now she's taking off her bra. Now she's taking off her pants.
It's like ASMR jealousy. Now she's taking off one sock and then the other sock.
Now she's taking off all and my stomach and it's all in your jaws. Now he takes off her dress. No.
We've talked about those songs that, you did a whole bit about, songs that have survived or not survived over the last few years, and you kind of get a bit of a sense of, well, when we were growing up, you had songs from the 70s from, I don't know, a couple from Deep Purple or Led Zeppelin or whoever that had sort of stood the test of that period. And I think of the Killers as a real stayer from the noughties, like we're 20 years later and everyone's still like, if you put any of those songs on, people would be like, fuck yeah.
Put on Mr. Brightside. Mr. Brightside is one of those songs that is in a very, very rare group of songs, a very rare company. Mr. Brightside is like, you put Mr. Brightside on at a house party and everybody just loses their goddamn minds.
Yeah, it's true.
Mr. Brightside. So, Brandon, be my best friend. Look, Chris, I'm very susceptible. Look, here's the thing as well, Brandon. I'm very susceptible to trends, and I lack identity, and I'm generally quite vulnerable because I lack a strong sense of identity, and I have a lot of problems, and I worry a lot about people not liking me and not having enough purpose and not having a community. So if you want to come into my life, if you want to pop over to Tempelhof and you want to bring your books with you, you want to turn up in that little outfit that you'll wear, and if you want to turn up in a little suit, I know that you're Elder Flowers. If you want to turn up at my door, and that is a flower, isn't it? The elderflower. That's great.
Yeah.
Can we just come up with that?
The elderflowers.
If you want,
that's the name of this episode, I'm afraid. Despite the fact that it's going to draw Brandon's attention to this criticism.
Come around.
He should
have a non-coffee. You know they don't drink coffee? Did you know that?
Wow.
Mormons, they're not even allowed to drink coffee. I think that's what
sends them too crazy. Wow, they drink coffee. They drink coffee in Saudi Arabia, don't they? You don't want to be going too much harder than those guys. But there you go. It's kind of, I think you'd be on the front foot with the return of Christianity. You'd say to the likes of Brandon Peterson, well, you might have restored, you might have restored your faith in Christ, at least in a sort of abstract way. But I'm on board with the view that he came and converted some Native Americans to Christianity. So that's real deep esoteric faith you guys haven't even reached.
Brandon, we absolutely cannot wait for you to come to my house in Tempelhof, sit me down on the couch, and you give me the good word. I'm going to be real open to it. I'm looking for a cult to join, and yours could be the cult for me. John, I have a really silly little quick bit here if you want to just table tennis it back and forth. And if you don't like it, you can just go, nah, I don't want to talk about that. I got a better bit.
Yeah.
How about we bring back the expression or the negation of what you've said by saying a sentence and ending it with the word not.
I love that. Yeah.
Do you remember Wayne's World? Does everybody remember the early 90s slang when to show everyone that you were the coolest guy in town, you'd say, oh, guys, I could really go for some Brussels sprouts for dinner. Not. And everyone would high five you and go, party time. Excellent.
Yeah, it's true. And I think even at the time I was like, that expression's not for me, but I'm happy for other people to use it because it's the early 90s. But I think, God, imagine if now you were out with someone and they used it like non-ironically.
Well, I heard the reason I had this on my notes is because I was listening to a podcast, and I am going to name and shame. Again, I'm just burning all of our bridges here. Scott Galloway, who I quite like, who's known as Professor G on the interwebs. He's a entrepreneur, and I think he lectures in marketing. He used it the other week. He said something, and then he was, to show that he was being sarcastic. You know, he was going, "Oh yeah, well, maybe I'll just do this and I'll do this because that's a really good idea." And then he just went, "Not." I couldn't believe it. I mean, Scott Galloway, I think, is pushing 60.
Okay.
But I just hadn't heard it for years.
He's been too busy grinding to keep up with the expressions evolving.
And the only other time that I remember, well, the other use of it outside of Wayne's World, which popularized it, I think when Wayne's World 1 came out the first Wayne's World came out in 92, I'm pretty sure. And then in the early 2000s, it must have been, there was a Sacha Baron Cohen Borat movie. It's either the movie or the show. And Borat, the Kazakhstani journalist character that he plays, is getting trained in American socializing. So they've done they've set up some class for him. You know, he said something like, can you teach me to be American? And the guy says, yeah, this is how, maybe he's even being taught how to act on a date. And the guy's saying, oh, this is how you can be funny, which is always just so cringe going to a class that teaches you to be funny. And the guy says, well, you could tell a not joke. Please, you tell him, well, he's not. Please, what is not joke? And the guy goes, oh, you might say, oh, I had a really good time during my physical with the doctor. Not. And this would, I guess, be 10 years after Wayne's World, and already the reason that is so funny is because it's so cringe that this guy was still using not jokes. Just maybe in case anybody doesn't know, maybe we have to explain this. A not joke is, you would say that it negates the previous phrase that you say, John.
Yeah,
it's funny actually because there's an expression, there's a word in German which kind of has the same function, which is the word doch, which we don't have in English, and it's basically just a word that means I don't agree with what you've just said. I don't like so you could say, oh, it was 42 degrees yesterday, and the person will just go doch, which means like, no, it wasn't. It's a single word. And so sometimes doch reminds me of the word not, because it just kind of negates the previous
bring it back
sentence.
in Berlin. Doch. use the Wayne's World intonation with your German phrasing. That'd be great.
How good would it be, like you say, to be at a social setting in a social function now? What if you used it like 5 times in a night?
You're sitting next to someone at a wedding or something and they just keep going, this food is really disgusting. Not. You go,
it's really good. Not.
I'm at the, I must be at the table with all the shit guests.
And the other guests are doing not jokes and also talk about getting out of bed on the wrong side this morning. They're doing what was the other one we came up with? We did talk about, and now that's what I call.
Yeah, now that's what I call.
You're on the table with the people doing. Now that's what I call and talk about jokes.
The other one I love, which I think should come back as well, is I don't think so. When people say that, people used to say that. I don't think so. That was a bit of a Jim Carrey-ism, I think.
Yeah.
And Wayne's World probably would have picked that up as well. And maybe Hackers, you would have seen that sort of antics.
It's actually reminded me. Empire Records. I've got Empire Records, by the way, John. I've got Empire Records on my notes to do a bit of a deep dive on because it's so bad and it doesn't make any sense. And I'd like to go through it one episode just because it's this interesting film that we loved as kids because it was the characters were just a couple of years older than we were when it came out. So you were watching these teens that worked in a record store and you just thought, this is the cool, imagine working in a record store and being a cool teen. And, there's like a skater and a stoner and a cool guy and like a preppy girl. And the plot makes absolutely no sense, but you didn't realize that
it was all in the attitude. It was not.
It was all dude. It was all in the dude. You've also this not bit. I actually didn't initially connect this not bit to another bit that I had on my notes, but I just remembered that I also had on my notes, John. I do have right here, right now, a bit of 90s slang that I can just run through and you can tell me if you were using these. And the kids, the Gen Zers that we have out there are going to absolutely love this. John, did you ever say all that in a bag of chips?
I heard it many times. I don't think I adopted it myself.
What about as if?
All that as if. Yeah, I fucking use that all the time.
Man.
In fact, I feel like that's still... I just have kind of suspended it. I haven't taken it. I still say it in my head, as if. Imagine that.
Can you use? I don't want to put you on the spot.
I'm really going to bring these back.
Can you give examples of these as I go through them? Because there might be some Gen Zers who are just going to go, I don't understand how to use that. So
yeah, sure. So as if is kind of, I guess sarcasm was huge and sort of cynicism was huge in the 90s. It was a sign of cool. And we took that too far, and now we've got irony sickness as a culture, and I feel partly responsible for that. And I'm sorry, but people would say in an expression of doubt, you'd say, well, Joe Biden's come out and said that despite being 81 and having completely fucked the debate up, that he's good to go and he'll be a great president for another 4 years.
That's an excellent example. That's an excellent example. Did you... These are so... It's so... we should... This makes me want to start a sketch show, or we should just... Because I'm just picturing how hilarious it would be.
She thinks she's
a hidden camera
bag of chips.
Hidden camera show where you do go to a dinner party and you just drop all of these expressions into the conversation with a new person that you've met at a dinner party. What about don't go there?
Don't go there. Man, this is really stirring some neglected brain circuitry. Nick, don't go there. I think there was a Simpsons bit where they were watching, was it Simpsons? They were watching TV. It was like classic sort of ahead of its time Simpsons, summarizing what was so dumb about the era that it was basically in. And they were watching this show. We'll be right back with Don't Go There.
That's
and then
right. Wow.
Somebody said something and then someone else just said, Don't go there. And then everyone just laughed for like 60 seconds.
So they've written here, this is from yourdictionary.com, this article. They've written, nowadays you would just say, just stop, or, oh my God, enough. However, in the 90s, you'd tell someone, don't go there. It means that is enough, or I don't want to talk about it. It's funny you should mention The Simpsons, because the one they have underneath that is eat my shorts, which is hilarious because nobody said that. That was just in The Simpsons. Bart said that, and that was it. Nobody was fucking going
Probably
on.
that woman who voices Bart thought it was a cool
Nancy
expression.
Cartwright. Nancy Cartwright, the classic example of the person who voices a character who doesn't understand why the character is funny, because we forget that voice actors aren't the ones that write the show.
They're not. They're just reading the words.
They're just reading the words.
Yeah. And then she'd go,
Don't have a cow, man.
Interviews, rather than going, oh, let's get John Schwartzwelder or one of the writers of Simpsons on to explain why it was so funny. We'll get Nancy Cartwright. And then she's just going, don't have a cow, man, for 20 minutes. And everyone's going, no, it wasn't really about doing the Bart, man. I feel like that's not.
She was out there
have you watched the show?
She was out there doing the Bart man. Hey, do the Bart man. Would you
now?
Sorry,
just
go on.
a quick mention of the fact that Anthony LaPaglia, who is from the great town of Adelaide in South Australia, was in Empire Records.
He's the record store owner.
And I've been watching in a period of intense boredom. I put on an episode of Frasier a couple of months ago, only to realize that he was on it.
He's the brother.
He's the brother of Daphne.
That's right.
And he's kind of this he's largely disliked by fans of the show because he played this very sort of hammy, perpetually
British
pissed character.
Yeah, he's sort of
exactly, and sort of always stumbling around and just a perennial kind of scrounger. But that was obviously, the 90s was obviously a great time for him. And
I wonder what he's up to now. He was in, wasn't he? Was he in Lantana? I think that great film that I need to watch again.
In Lantana, I think.
Actually, that great Australian film. John, did you ever say to anybody, talk to the hand?
Because the face ain't listening.
Rather than saying you've heard enough, you can throw in this fun little 90s phrase. I don't know about that, dictionary.com. Don't be throwing any of this into a fucking conversation. You can throw
Imagine, that would be great, actually. I'm loving the idea of the camera sketch because, some of these you would kind of go, well, this person's just got sort of an anachronistic way of talking, especially if there was somebody who came of age in the 90s. You might just think they're very uncool. But imagine if they started pulling out talk to the hand. You'd be like, surely this is a bit, but I don't know.
Talk to the hand.
Oh, that was another one that
What one?
Simpsons talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. Amazing. They were really onto this.
It says, rather than saying you've heard enough, you can throw this fun little 90s phrase into your vocabulary. However, don't forget to put your hand up when you do it. Can't get more 90s than that. So guys, if somebody's saying something to you and you don't want to listen anymore, maybe they're bored or you're bored or they're saying something that you don't like the sound of, you go, talk to the hand. Because the face the face ain't listening was inferred, so you could leave out. You could eventually leave out. It started with, I'm sure it started with talk to the hand because the face ain't listening, but it became so popular and so known throughout the world. Even Kalahari Bushmen were doing talk to the hand. They would hold up their cow's blood stained hand and say
Yeah.
their mouths would be dripping with cow's milk and their hands would be covered in cow's blood, the Kalahari pusherman. Say, talk to the hand because the face ain't listening. So you can eventually just leave off because the face ain't listening. So talk to the hand.
And then in The Simpsons, they had starring David Faustino, who was the son from Married with Children. They were making fun of the fact that he was associated with like shit 90s comedy.
They've got other ones in here which sound 90s, but nobody said them. Like here we have "getting jiggy." The phrase came from the popular music video from Will Smith, "getting jiggy with it," but nobody said that. Nobody said. I guess if you were trying to be lame deliberately, you'd might say.
You would have to be being lame deliberately. That's right.
Yeah.
There's a line in Seinfeld where he says, "I got jiggy with it," but it's implied that he was probably putting on that song, "Getting Jiggy with It."
Yeah. What about home skillet? So here, you don't know that one?
I don't think I know that one.
Home skillet is another word for friends in the 90s slang. You might say, "Hey, home skillet," or "What's up, home skillet?" Either phrase was an appropriate form of a greetings for a 90s teen. I'm not sure if that's true, your dictionary.com. I love how they're just being so definitive with all of this.
Yeah, everyone used home skillet between the years of 1990 and 1999.
You couldn't be a teen in the 90s without saying, "What's up, home skillet?"
I might start using that though. It's quite cool.
What about
home skillet?
What about no da, John? Just use that.
No da. Yeah, that's a little ableist, you would probably think, in the puritanical times that we now live in. Think.
Can you give an example of how that would be used at the dinner party?
Yeah, like when it was sort of viewed as a different way of saying, perhaps a less blue way of saying no shit.
Yeah, that's obvious.
You'd say no duh when someone, which doesn't make any sense now that I think about it, which doesn't. But you would say it when somebody said something that was blindingly obvious, or when you heard something from some source that was blindingly obvious.
Yeah.
You would say, for example, Biden needs to be replaced in the next week, or Trump will win a second term, and then you'd say, no duh. I'm just going to use that for all of my examples.
You've turned into Tim Heidecker from On Cinema, where you're just like awkwardly crowbarring in all of this, all of your own personal politics into the comedy show, into the show that's meant to be about. This is our tech comedy podcast.
Yeah, somebody might say, despite Gavin Newsom's failings,
he's the only appropriate choice that we have left. Right. He's our only chance of. You might have said in the 90s, despite Gavin Newsom's shortcomings, he remains our strongest chance of defeating Trump.
And then somebody would say, no duh.
No duh.
Say, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Last one, John. What about, would you say to somebody at the dinner party if they were they maybe had a few too many glasses of red wine and they were being a little bit loud, and suddenly it went from being fun and funny to just a tiny bit awkward. The silence drops and you turn to them and you think, I'm going to be real cool and I'm going to calm this situation right down and show that I'm a hip, funny dude. And the person with the glass of red wine is going, yeah, 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 yeah. And then they stop for a second. Everyone's like, oh, it's a bit awkward. And you go, Gary, take a chill pill. And everyone goes, woo.
I'd probably add, awkward.
Yeah. Gary would look down at you and go, whatever, and just sit down. It's all very Friends, isn't it? It's all very TV show Friends.
Yeah.
What were Chandler's catchphrases?
He was very kind of cynical 90s. Cynical, funny.
Chandler Bing slang, 90s slang.
What did he always used to say? What are Chandler's catchphrases?
Yeah. Chandler Bing and the Complicated Legacy of Friends. It's going to be about how it was like homophobic and fattest. It was like it was weightest because when they would do flashbacks to the 80s when they all met, they made Monica wear a grotesque fat suit and it was hilarious.
And
Chandler's
Chandler's most sarcastic comments ranked by Screen Rant. Imagine writing this article. He would say things like, I'm not great at the advice. Can I interest you in a sarcastic comment? Or he'd say,
so Chandler.
yeah. Or he'd say, no, I don't. All of these are too specific. One of them, he has shaving cream on his face and he says it's rabies. So it seems like this internet thing is here to stay, huh? He says in one episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. He had, guys, if you're unable to understand what good comedy is and you are familiar with Friends, then write us in, hello@dptm.org. Tell us, because I have a feeling that Chandler used to say a few things that were very in line with kind of not or did I do that Urkel style.
Yeah, if we've missed them.
Catchphrases. Yeah.
And you know that Chandler said some real 90s things, then write us in and let us know, and we'll do a best of Bing next week. We'll do a real Bing off. We're going to have an episode next week called Back to Bing, the best of Chandler Bing. Could I be any more Chandler?
That's the one. Could I be any more something?
Could
I be any more disappointed?
Do that at the dinner party, John. We've been doing this bit for like 160 episodes, the bit where I say, do this thing at the dinner party that shows how out of touch you are. That's the whole show. If somebody was going to write about the show in a newspaper, they have an ongoing bit where Alex says to John, you have to do this thing at a dinner party, which makes you look socially inept.
And then I pretend to have done it just to appease you. Could I be any more disappointed that we've come to the episode's end?
Oh, man, what a segue. Absolute
This
professional.
has been episode 170. If we've missed any Chandlerisms, please let us know, and please do so in time for next week's double episode, which will be both about Microsoft Bing and about Chandler Bing. It'll be the ultimate tech pop culture mashup, simply called The Great Bing Off.
Awesome.
And we can't wait to see you then.
Thank you so much. Go, John. You can say.
We can't wait to see you then. That is next week.
At the pod. You say cars.
Cars.
Ciao, everybody. Cheers.